I'm afraid I'm not as bullish as my good friend Rilo, but I'm half bullish. So I'm going to take you through what I believe is the state of South Africa as I see it. This is not the Clay Brick Association speaking, it's just me. And give you some pointers to some of the issues I think are going to come up over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years. I've also been told that you have tea at 4 o'clock, so I'm going to keep it short. I want you to enjoy your tea on time as much as possible without...
Joke champagne.
I think it's... I don't think the problems in South Africa, I think they're obvious to all of us. This morning I saw on your program you discussed the energy challenges that we have, and I think all of us here sit at our workplaces, at homes, and you know the load shedding comes along and it's a big issue for all of us. I think one of the big challenges, and we have sort of referred to it, is the fact that our economy is not growing fast enough. 1.5% GDP growth last year is absolutely appalling, and people are saying, oh, they say it will be 2%, the finance minister said this. I think it's just not good enough for the kind of transformation of this economy that we need. So I think the big question, the big political question, is whether our leaders are focused enough on the problem at hand, or whether they're doing other things and looking other way and so forth. This is the big political question. If our leaders can take their minds off other things and actually address the real issues, which is growth of this economy, getting rid of things like the load shedding and so forth, and actually getting all of us back to it, then we'll have a country that works. Unfortunately, you look at our parliament and what's been going on there. You have to wonder when you see fights in parliament, when you see the kind of behavior that we've seen over the past year, you begin to get depressed about South Africa. So today my big aim is to help you, differentiate between the things that I think we should all worry about and the things that I think many of us say, oh, you know, Jacob Zuma this and so forth and so forth. For me, I make a distinction between two things, and that is how one looks at South Africa. One, for me, I think we should look at the institutions in South Africa. Do the institutions work? If the institutions of democracy and the institutions of accountability work in South Africa, then we're all fine. The other stuff that happens, for me, is what I call substantive issues in society. That's the noise of politics. That's Julius Malema seeing a microphone and standing up and using it and saying all kinds of things that make it onto the front page of the newspaper, and everyone says, oh, it's the end of the world, did you hear what Julius said, and so forth and so forth. What should we be worrying about? It's the institutional stuff that I believe we should worry about. What do I mean by that? Think about the police services in South Africa. Think about what happened at Marikana. How can we, all of us in South Africa, continue to say things are okay when the police service that we set up in 1994 from the old South African police, and we turned it around and said, now we're going to serve. In just one day, the police service in Marikana killed 34 mine workers. Now, a lot of people will tell you what happened in Marikana doesn't mean that those guys were nice people. In the 10 days before the Marikana massacre in 2012, 10 people had been killed. And they had been killed largely, clearly, by other workers who wanted them to go on strike and so forth and so forth. But does that mean that our police service, if you have on your side a strike, a riot, do they have the right to come and shoot and kill people in one afternoon, in 30 minutes, 34 people dead? Why is it the police service is becoming more and more violent, is kicking people over? We're becoming more militarized than what we thought our police service would be, and that is a service to our people. That is an institution that I believe is under threat. Do you believe that, for example, Oscar Pistorius got a free and fair trial? If you say yes, then you're saying the judiciary works. But the minute you start saying, ooh, those judges, maybe they're getting bribes, maybe they're getting a little bit of this, then you're saying, if you sue me today, I could go to the judge and say, ooh, here's a little something, and the problem goes away. If you start to believe that our magistrates, our judges, actually take a little backhander, then we have a problem. That is an institution that is key. Because if I take you to court tomorrow, you want to believe that the magistrate or the judge will sit there and preside over the case without saying, oh, no, he's very big in the Clay Brick Association, so let's not go heavy on him. Oh, Justice Malala is friends with President Zuma, let's not go heavy on him. Oh, he'll give me a little something. Then there's a problem. The judiciary has to be independent and represent all of us. We've seen what's happened at the Hawks. One of the things about South Africa is the fact that we have an independent police unit called the Hawks. It came after the Scorpions were done away with. Now, what's been happening at the Hawks is that the minister has got rid of the head of the Hawks because the head of the Hawks unit was investigating now the Nkandla issue. Now, if there isn't a unit in our police service that can actually investigate absolutely everyone from top to bottom, then you have a problem. And that is why it was such a tragedy that the Scorpions were disbanded. One of the key things about the Hawks and the difference between the Scorpions and the Hawks was that the Scorpions did not need any permission to investigate anyone. Whereas the Hawks actually had to apply to the president and say, dear Mr. President, I need to investigate a little matter concerning yourself. Will you give me permission? This is a big problem. So how independent is this institution? How good is it? And how bad are things when we see the head of the Hawks having to be let out? Rudolph spoke a bit about taxes. I'm happy to be here with you. I know you all pay your taxes. I know you do. But what's been happening at SARS? SARS has gone through. Now, one of the things that Rudolph didn't say about how amazing this country is the fact that we have one service that you can go anywhere in the world and say, man, there's one thing we do brilliantly, and that's collect tax. And SARS under Pravin Gordhan became one of the top institutions in South Africa. But it now transpires that actually the former head is gone. The acting head is now being gone. Apparently there's all kinds of shenanigans going on there, and so forth and so forth. And many people are saying, well, perhaps it was because SARS was beginning to ask questions about some powerful people's tax affairs. And if that begins to happen, that's an institution that we're proud of, and now it's no longer so beautiful. So there is an issue there. So for me, these are the things that we need to really worry about. The institutions of accountability, the institutions of democracy in South Africa. But I know South Africans don't always want to talk about the institutions. The people like myself in newspapers and on television, we don't talk about the institutions enough. We talk about, oh, you know, there's a nice clay brick house in KwaZulu-Natal. What did you say about capital formation? So they did some work on it. They got more bricks, and now they've done a lot of work on it. And it's a big house in Nkandla. And that's what we like to talk about. So every day you'll hear your politicians in parliament, they go to parliament and say, pay back the money in Nkandla, pay back the money in Nkandla, and so forth. And everyone is up in arms talking about Nkandla and so forth. Let me tell you this. Nkandla was a big issue before the May 7 election. Now, over the next year, you're going to see Nkandla on the agenda in the news virtually every day. Why? Because it's a fantastic piece of, you can do stuff with Nkandla. You can talk about it and people get angry about Nkandla and it's like, no, 248 million rand, that's my money, I want it back, and so forth and so forth. But most times, actually your politicians want to talk about Nkandla because, hey, you know, what's happening with Nkandla is that it gets a lot of mud on the ANC, on President Zuma, and I get a bit of votes from that. I'm not saying by the way, that we shouldn't talk about Uganda. I think we should talk about Uganda all the time. But the key thing is that we're not talking about what happened at the Department of Public Works. What happened at the Department of Public Works? Think about it. Matt, you have a budget, right? Jonathan, you have a budget. Now, the budget for Uganda was 27 million. So you have a budget for 27 million. Can I have some of it? So you have a budget for 27 million. It goes to 30 million, okay? Now, some people would be asking, Jonathan, what's going on? 30 million, we said 27. But it goes to 40, it goes to 50, it goes to 100, it goes to 150. No one says anything. It goes to 200 million from 27 million. It goes to 248 million, and no one says anything. So that's an institution that's broken down here. It's the Department of Public Works. Have you had any politician take up a microphone and say, let's do something about what happened at the Department of Public Works? Let me tell you this. At that department, it means that when I put in my bid for some work there, who am I going to talk to? Because no one is being asked to explain how you will go from 27 million to 248 million rand. That's what we should be talking about more. But hey, in South Africa, we like the North, so we'll talk about this house and talk about it and talk about it, but actually that's a big issue and the institution has fallen apart. So when you hear about Uganda, my view is that, just keep going. It's not the real issue. It is an issue, but it's not the real issue. The real issue are the institutions that are falling apart. I can see many of you do want to talk about Uganda, so you can do that. But my view is that please keep calm on that one. There are bigger and different issues to really go on about. But Uganda will be a big issue. We have an election coming up in May, and that's because we had an election last year, and the next one is the local elections that Rudolph spoke about, and they'll be in May next year, and those will be very interesting. They'll be interesting because when you look at last year's election, President Zuma won 62%, and a lot of people said, oh, fantastic, 62% is great, and so forth. But a lot of people are asking, well, 62% for the ANC, I'm not too sure. And it's because of this. Look at how well the ANC did in 2004. Look where it went in 2009. Now it's at 62%. Look at the DA, the main opposition, from 12% to 16% to 22%. And for many, many people, the big question is what happens next year in May when we all go to vote? Because if you look at the metros, look at where I grew up in the city of Tshwane, the ANC was at 59 and 10 percentage points down to 49. So when Rudolph says there's going to be some big changes here, where the ANC may have to go into coalition with the EFF or the DA or someone else, that could really happen. The guys from Nelson Mandela Bay, that was close in 2011. You remember when the DA and the ANC only got 51.7% in the local election. Unfortunately or fortunately, hope is gone now. But whoever's around the EFF and the DA, this could be a headache for the ANC as well. Look at the city of Johannesburg from 62% to 52%. What does it mean? For people from the Western Cape, this is something that they've gone through before. You have competition in the system, and when you have competition in the system, the noise rises. You're going to see the ANC fighting to defend itself from the DA and the EFF, and the DA and the EFF are going to say, you know what, we can do this. If you think about the news this morning, at the University of Fort Hare, which has traditionally been, this is where ANC leaders go and so forth, the DA student organization won the SRC election overnight. Now, if you say, oh, the DA is a party for whites and so forth, you've got a big problem here because you look at the pictures, there's no white kid there, but the DA student organization has just won Fort Hare. So these numbers are going to lead to a lot of noise in the system because we, for the first time, have a real competition in our politics. And the ANC will be very aware of that. Why is the ANC losing support so drastically? Gwede Mantashe, who's the secretary of the ANC, says, no, we've lost the black middle classes. A lot of other people would say, actually, you need to look at yourself and say, is the leader of the ANC, President Zuma, the right person for the job? Is he the right person to lead the ANC? Isn't it because of him that the ANC is losing support now? And so that will be the focus over the next year. A lot of pressure is going to come up on President Zuma, and whether he should actually play any role whatsoever in the ANC election. The people who are happy are the DA. They went from 16% to 22%. They've got 1 million new voters, largely black middle class voters. They had aimed for 30%, but they only got 22%. But they are in play, and the person who's going to have to deliver the goods is clearly Mr Malala, who I believe will win the election next week for the leadership of the DA. And the big question for me about the DA and its leadership is whether he has enough experience and enough appeal to go from the 22% to 30%. I worry that he's only been in the DA for 4 years, that he hasn't built up enough support. Other people say, no, Justice, you worry too much. Actually, he's had enough time to build that support, and the DA will do better in next year's election in 2019 than it did in the past. So that will be the big thing to watch. I must say, though, my view about Mr. Maimane is that I think he does fantastic things with speaking and holding Mr. Zuma to account, for example, in Parliament. But if you look at Gauteng, for example, where he was running for premier in the last election, the DA only went up by about 10 percentage points from 22 to 32. The DA spent 100 million rand on the campaign in Gauteng only, and they got the best political strategist in the world, a man called Stan Greenberg, who had advised Bill Clinton, advised Barack Obama on how to run their election campaigns, advised the ANC in 1994 here. The thing about Stan Greenberg, wherever he goes in the world to advise a candidate, they win. With Mr. Maimane, they didn't get anywhere much. So it will be interesting to see how he handles the fights that are ahead for him after winning as leader of the DA. My view is that he's going to win, though. I don't think Wilmot James or the others who put their hand up will actually can stop him. I think he's way ahead in terms of supporting the DA. Of course, the happiest man with that election last year is Mr. Malema. Mr. Malema went from 0 to nearly 6.35%. 1.1 million people voted for the EFF. The key thing about the EFF is what does it do and what is it doing with that 6.35%. On some issues, he's worked with Mmusi Maimane and taken on President Zuma and the ANC in Parliament. But there's a lot of talk about how now Mr. Julius Malema went to Maputo and met President Zuma, and that they would work together to bring Mr. Malema back into the ANC. My view is that Mr. Malema is not going back to the ANC. I think the EFF is here to stay. I think there's a lot of bad blood between President Zuma and Julius Malema. They have a long history together, and some of it is not very fortunate. So, in my view, the chances of Mr. Malema going back to the ANC are pretty slim, if not zero. So I expect that the ANC and the EFF are going to continue to fight and cause trouble for each other over the next 4 years. What does 6.35% give Mr. Malema? Mr. Malema's policy platform is this: I'm going to nationalize the mines, I'm going to nationalize the land, I'm going to expropriate land without compensation, and so forth and so forth. Can he do that with the 6.35% he has? He can't. He can't even change the constitution to do that. To change the constitution, you need a 2/3 majority. To change the Bill of Rights, you need 75% majority in both houses of parliament. So if Mr. Malema actually wants to achieve all the things that he says he wants to achieve, he's going to have to, one, speak to President Zuma, because the ANC has 62%. With Mr. Malema 6%, they can get to 69%, and then you can start to fiddle with the constitution. The ANC has shown no appetite whatsoever to nationalize the mines or the banks and so forth. So it's unlikely that it will support Mr. Malema on that one. But if he wants to expropriate without compensation, then he's talking about property rights. The Constitution guarantees everyone's property rights. You can't take my land without actually changing the Constitution. The ANC is at 62%. If the ANC wanted to change, it would need to speak to the DA. And I can't imagine the DA actually saying, yes, we want to expropriate land without compensation. So I don't think it's going to happen. So Mr. Malema is going to have to speak to the ANC and to the DA about actually getting to 75%. So I don't think it's going to happen. So if you want to know what's going to happen in South Africa, for me, over the next 5 years, what's policy, where is it going, and so forth, the game is still with the ANC. The EFF, yes, causes a lot of noise, it's on the front pages, but actually, if stuff is going to happen, it's going to emanate from the ANC, and that's where I continue to look, because I think the others don't have the numbers to actually push through their policies in Parliament. The EFF has a big problem. Mr. Malema's tax troubles have come back, so he might not, after June, be in Parliament. That means that he's got 30 MPs sitting in the Cape in Parliament, and he will be out there if he does get sequestrated. And if that happens, it means that he will be away from the heart of things. Now, the problem there is that if he is taken away from the center of things in the EFF might suffer. If you think about the history of political parties in South Africa, only 2 parties have grown in the new South Africa. The first one is the ANC, which went from 62% in 94 to 69% in 2004, and back down to 62%. The DA went from 1.7% in 1994, it's now at 22%. It's the most phenomenal grower in our politics. Everyone else, Bantu Holomisa, Pope, the ID, all of them came with an election, like the UDM in 1999, 2004 ID, 2009 Pope. All of them have gone to either 7%, 4%, and all of them have gone back down to about or less than 1%. So it will be interesting to see whether Mr. Malema can continue on the growth path that he saw in the first election. That said, I have to say, for the first year of being in Parliament, he's done very well. He's kept up the momentum, and I think if he stays with his party, it's likely to continue to grow. It's an interesting thing what Mr. Malema has achieved. For the first time in South Africa, we have a party calling for nationalization with nearly 7% in Parliament. Since 1994, the PAC, the AZAPO, many other parties which call for nationalization have not gone above 1% in our parliament. Virtually everyone who is built around the ANC or around market principles has been 99%. So for the first time, we have nearly 7% of MPs calling for nationalization. So it's a shift to the left. It's not a big shift, but it's still a shift, and it will be interesting what happens with it. What are the policies that I think will have an impact on all of us over the next 5 years? The first thing to say is that the ANC has said that it wants this radical economic transformation. What does it mean? It means that the ANC believes that it has to intervene in the economy. It has to help this economy transform. And so for me, one of the things you'll see is government becoming more and more activist, saying, I want to do this, I want to do that, instead of becoming less and less interventionist. So you're going to see a government that gives you more laws, more regulation, wants to intervene in whatever it is, whatever line of business you may be following. The first one, where this government wants to achieve certain things, is on land. Over the next 5 years, and in my view, over the next 10 years, you're going to see a lot more talk on land. You will see a lot more legislation beginning last year with the passing of the Land Rights, Restitution of Land Rights Amendment Act. This is a new piece of legislation that says that if my family, for example, was moved from this piece of land in whatever year, I had a period in the 1990s to apply for restitution. Now the restitution process has been reopened, which means that if I do have this farm and people did not put in a claim, they can do so again. Since the process was started, 40,000 new claims have been put in, and the Department of Land Reform says there could be up to 400,000 new claims put in up until 2018. So for many people who are on the land, who use the land in agriculture, for example, there will be a period of uncertainty because they are waiting, wondering if there's going to be a claim or not on that piece of land. And you're going to see more legislation along the same lines over the next 5 years. There's a lot of focus on land in this administration. An example is what is called the 50-50 policy, the strengthening the relative rights of the people working the land. And that's a new policy that did not come via the ANC, it came via the minister. And this policy says that if you own, for example, an agricultural piece of land, you have to sell 50% of it to the workers on your land. Now that has caused a lot of consternation among the agricultural sector. There's a big debate about it. President Zuma has said that it's going to be put on pilot. 20 farms are beginning to run the pilot program, and we'll see how it goes. So you're going to see more and more action from the ANC on land. It's not just the three, it's not just the restitution only. There's about 8 pieces of legislation that are coming, all of them on or about land, and it's going to be, and you've seen some of this, President Zuma standing up and saying, foreigners cannot own land in South Africa, then turning around saying, no, they can own agricultural land, they can own residential property, and so forth and so forth. So over the next 10 years, my view is that South Africa is going to see a lot of movement on land from the ANC. The other thing is that you're going to see an ANC that wants to intervene in the economy and doesn't want to intervene in the economy. It's going to sort of be, oh, I like Rudolf Botha and his kind of economics, and no, I like Kosatu and those kinds of economics, and it's going to be pulling this way and that way. I expect to see a lot of flip-flopping on economic policy in particular. Also expect to see government, for example, government has said that it's going to give Eskom 23 billion rand as a bailout. A lot of people are sitting there saying, no, sell SAA or sell this or other parastatal. That is not going to happen. This government believes that those parastatals can be used for purposes of development. So you're going to see, in fact, government giving SAA more money and other state-owned enterprises receiving more money. The mines and minerals, I'd like to share Rudolf's enthusiasm that commodities are going to come back up, and maybe they will. I'm not an expert on that. What you will see, though, is that mining ownership is coming increasingly under the spotlight. The minister says the once empowered, always empowered principle, whereby you did a deal, an empowerment deal, and your partner sold out. He's saying, no way, you've got to remain empowered. You can't say, no, the people sold, and therefore, what's going to happen to me? So you're going to see more and more emphasis on minerals, on mining in South Africa. And I think over the next 5 years, this issue is not going to be settled. It's going to continue. This government wants to see more employment equity and more black economic empowerment. So you're going to see the Minister of Labor already a lot of regulations out. There'll be more coming over the next year, in fact, new regulations and so forth. So we're going to do a lot more administration of around employment equity. You spoke about energy this morning. My view is that we're going to get nuclear energy in South Africa, and it is most likely that it's going to come from Russia, because Russia are now one of our best friends, and President Zuma was there, and a deal of sorts was announced some time back. Rudolf spoke about infrastructure. this government wants to spend more money on infrastructure. If you look at Finance Minister Nene's budget, clearly he needs to spend. The construction companies keep on saying that I'm not seeing that money coming my way. I need to fill my order book, and so we need to see more of that happening. But the commitment is certainly there. I think in this year's budget it was a trillion rand, nearly, over the next 3 years in expenditure. So I believe that this government will spend on infrastructure. The other thing is that, my wife likes saying to me, "Oh, Barack Obama he speaks so well, he's so handsome, he's fantastic." And a lot of people think so. President Zuma's partner there believes so. But this administration has given up on America. It doesn't see the United States as a meaningful friend. Increasingly, this administration says there are two places to look for South African engagement. The first is the rest of the continent, so South Africa becoming more and more involved, and South Africa has been involved over the past 20 years. In fact, on the continent, you will see South Africa becoming even more involved, particularly after these xenophobic attacks and so forth. So South Africa, the administration believes that if South African business wants to grow, go to the north, and they will do whatever they can to open doors for people, whether it's Angola or elsewhere. South Africa sees the rest of the continent as where its partners and its partnerships lie. The other big partner for South Africa is China. President Zuma believes that China is a partner of benefit for South Africa, that we will grow through China, that China is where we should all be looking rather than elsewhere. So expect that relationship to become even more intertwined. It's not going to get looser, or that no, China is a competitor or whatever. This administration wants to be friends with China. A lot of people say, no, China is bad for us, and they're going to do this to us and so forth. Maybe that's going to happen. And a lot of people say that's definitely going to happen. But this administration does not think so. So for me, it's, if there is competition for you coming from China, you need to deal with that rather than put your head in the sand, because it's definitely going to happen. What it all means, it's some of those things that I've said. Land, I believe, will be a big issue over the next 5 years. Employment equity, NHI, which I didn't speak about, but it's going to happen. And a contestation between the left and the right wing inside the ANC. One of the things that's going to be a big talking point over the next few years is who comes after President Zuma. A lot of people wanted, when Cyril Ramaphosa became the deputy president of the ANC, a lot of people said, "Oh, isn't he great? He's a businessman like us and so forth, and he speaks so well, and da-da-da, and da-da-da." Well, it's not a foregone conclusion that he will become the president of the ANC and therefore the president of South Africa. There is competition coming. President Zuma himself last year said, "I think it's time for South Africa to have a woman president." And many of us would say he's absolutely right, because look at what we have done. We men, have done to this country. But a lot of people are asking, is it any woman who's capable, or is it his former wife, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma? Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma is the chairperson of the African Union Commission. Her term comes to an end next November 2016. The ANC only goes to its conference to elect new leaders in December 2017, which means that she'll have a full year to begin to campaign and build up support inside the party. So a lot of people wanted Mr. Ramaphosa here to become the next president of the ANC and maybe president of South Africa, but it's not a foregone conclusion. There is serious competition coming from Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. This is the way things work in the ANC. You have to have significant support that arrives at the ANC conference and actually votes you in. President Zuma is supported by the KwaZulu-Natal province of the ANC, which is now the biggest province of the ANC. He's supported by the Mpumalanga province, which is now the second biggest province of the ANC. And between the two of them, if they say they support Dr. Dlamini Zuma, it is most likely that the Northwest, the Free State, will also come in with them. And in 2017, she will win and become the next president of the ANC and the candidate for the ANC in 2019. So my view is that it's not a foregone conclusion. And you're going to see a lot more noise around who is going to lead after President Zuma. Baleka Mbete, the Speaker of Parliament, said 2 weeks ago that, that there are some people plotting to get rid of President Zuma and that they want him to leave before his term comes to an end. My view is that that's not going to happen. If you think about what happened to Thabo Mbeki, it was the National Executive Committee of the ANC which said, President, it's time for you to go. We don't like you anymore. And he left in 2008. At that time, President Mbeki had 40% support in the National Executive Committee. President Zuma has 75% support in the ANC's National Executive Committee. So I'm not sure who will raise their hand and say, oops, President Zuma, I think it's time for you to go. So my view is that people can say whatever we want to say, but he's here to stay, and in my view, he will stay up to 2017 definitely, and in my view, his power will extend to up to 2019 when his term comes to an end as South African president. One other issue which I think is going to be of interest to you is the labor situation. Rudolph spoke passionately about what happened at Eskom and the labor problems there. I think one of the problems we face as a country is the fact that, think about what happened at Lonmin in Marikana. Lonmin had a workforce, the rock drillers who were getting about 4,500 Rand a month, and they wanted 12,500 Rand a month. They went on strike, they demanded their 12,500 Rand a month, and after the massacre and so forth, they ended up with increases of about 22%. Think about what happened with the platinum strike last year, where people ended up with guarantees that they'll move from 5,000 Rand to 12,500 Rand a month. What it means for the rest of the labor force in South Africa is that more and more people are becoming restless and saying, I want more, I need more. You look at public sector workers right now, they started off demanding 15%, and they're down to 10, 11% now. But they want that, and they're saying we're going on strike in South Africa if we don't get it. So you're going to see more and higher demands coming from workforces, in my view. And the fact that COSATU is so weak allows people the space to do that. I think internationally people are going to look at us and say, you guys, your labor force is not great. People are demanding more and more money. And I think it might lead to a dampening of investment in South Africa. I've spoken about the public sector wage review. As I said, the guys want between 11 and 15%. And I think they will get an above inflation increase, which puts another aspect into Minister Nene's budget. The fact that COSATU is so weak and that Zwelinzima Vavi has now essentially left COSATU means that you're going to have COSATU as it is and a new trade union federation built around NUMSA, which is more militant, which is more like AMCU being built. So let's say you are at SAA. Let's say you flew here from PE. If you flew here, you might know that at SAA, there used to be a COSATU union called SATAU, and now there's another one called NATAU or NTM or NATAU. And that union is now the majority union. That union is aligned to AMCU and NUMSA, and the old union now is sitting there saying, how do I get my members back? So they're demanding salary increases that are way higher than what they would have demanded because they're trying to show people that, no, I'm still militant and so forth. So you might see a lot of that happening, not just in aviation, but in other parts of the economy. And in my view, it's going to lead to a lot of turbulence over the next few months because these two men are trying to form a new federation that's going to contest against COSATU. So you're going to see some turbulence in labor, in my view. What are our challenges? I think the economic growth in South Africa is very poor, and it needs to get up to the 5.4% that the NDP says it has to get back to. Otherwise, there's nothing we can do about the fact that unemployment is so high. We have 8.3 million people unemployed in South Africa today. So on Monday, as people get up in the morning and go out, there are millions of our fellow countrymen and women who don't have anywhere to go. Plus, many of them are actually unemployable because the education system is so bad. And so we sit with a real time bomb, a structural issue of the fact that the education system is bad and a lot of people are unemployed. And I think when you take those things and you ask yourself, why are so many people angry in South Africa? Why do we kill fellow Africans from Zimbabwe, from Malawi, from other parts of the economy? So those real problems that we sit on, plus the anger that's coming through, why are we so angry about the past and statues and having these debates that I'm not quite sure are taking us anywhere? Why do we have 25 service delivery protests in South Africa every day? And you take those two, I think we need a lot of leadership, we need a lot of outstanding statements from people, and we need to do something about these things. Thankfully, I'm happy to tell you, as Rudolf will tell you, we have a plan. We have a fantastic plan in South Africa. It's called the National Development Plan. The National Development Plan was led in the writing by Trevor Manuel, who many of you know as the former finance minister, and his deputy in the National Planning Commission was Cyril Ramaphosa. It is the most fantastic plan you've ever read. It says South Africa can go to 6%, 7% growth by 2030. We can halve unemployment. We can build our schools into fantastic play institutions, and let's just do it. It needs leadership to be implemented. Everyone says they love the NDP. The ANC says we are committed to this thing and we are going to implement it. If to my point earlier about the EFF, 93% of the political parties in our parliament, the DA loves the NDP. Everyone loves the NDP. So what we need to do is to get the leaders that we have to implement it. If they do, then I think we'll be on an upward trajectory. So why aren't we doing it? I'm not too sure, but I think it's a leadership problem that needs to be tackled very quickly before we get used to being in a 1.5% growth environment. So, well, that's, I think I've depressed everyone enough now. I should leave. I just want to say some of the things that I've spoken about are really, when you look at what happened with the xenophobia in South Africa, it's one of those things to say, what's going on in this country? Really, this is it, and a lot of people say that. I just want to share a few personal stories about myself and how we in South Africa always say, it's the end of the world. It's 1 minute to midnight. It's over. Whoever's the last person to leave, turn off the light. I just want to say, we have that habit.
It's already off.
No, they're flickering. It's not off yet. So I just want to say, it's very easy in South Africa to fall into despondency and to say, Justice Malala said, it's terrible. Did you hear about the xenophobia or the service delivery protest and so forth? Is the world coming to an end in South Africa? And I just want to say, I'm older than many of you in the room now. But I remember in 1990, I was 20 and Nelson Mandela came out of jail, and I love newspapers. I've worked in newspapers all my life. I remember reading all the newspapers and thinking, oh dear, what's going to happen to this country? Everyone I knew, people I admired were saying, Nelson Mandela's walking out of jail, and Nelson Mandela stood up on the steps of City Hall in Cape Town on February 11, 1990, and said, nationalization is the policy of the ANC, we're going to nationalize, we're going to do this, and so forth. And people said, sell up, it's the end of the world. Nelson Mandela's out and it's over. And here we are this year, this country is celebrating 25 years since Nelson Mandela walked out of jail. And he might have said nationalization is going to happen. It didn't happen. Many people said it's the end of the world, it was going to be war in South Africa. We didn't fall into war. Instead, we built a fantastic, peaceful country with many, many problems that it has. So, is the world always ending? I was a journalist at the start in 1994. At the time, I had a lot more energy than I have now. So, I was called the violence reporter, and I was sent off to Sebokeng, Bulpatong, Soweto, all these townships where there was real violence. Serious violence in the hostels between the IFP, ANC, between the police and residents. It was just total chaos. But by April 27, 1994, I never used to have to get in a car and drive to Sebokeng or wherever. I used to just, my boss would say, Justice, just go to Park Station. Because on April 27, and in the month before, the 30 days before April 27, 1994, bombs were going off in the Joburg city center. That's how bad things looked. And many people said, this election is not going to work, South Africa is not going to work. And here we are, 21 years later. People like me are still writing, South Africa is not going to work, it's terrible. So, I had a flat near Ellis Park, and in 1995, everyone thought the Springboks would never win a Rugby World Cup. And they did, and you should have heard the noise that day. I thought, what's going on? I didn't follow rugby at the time, so it just, what's going on? What's that noise? A friend of mine said, it must be the end of the world. But no, the world didn't end at all. And South Africa went on to win another World Cup. South African women thought it's the end of the world when they saw there's a man like this in South Africa. But no, it wasn't the end of the world. So, I think the narrative is that we are challenged, but how deeply challenged are we? And are we like so many of the countries that we regard as basket cases on this continent and so forth? Rudolph spoke a bit about my favorite politician in the world, Robert Mugabe. He said he's a scientist. Now, a lot of people will say, South Africa is going a bit Zimbabwe, it's so bad, and this, and so forth, and so forth. But think about this country and and think about Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is a country that got independence in 1980, and Robert Mugabe walked in and he said, I'm going to do amazing things. And he's been saying he's going to do amazing things since then. It's been 35 years since Robert Mugabe got into power. That's a long time for any leader, even the most fantastic leader in the world. 35 years without giving anyone else a chance. What's going on there? You look at this picture, that's the leader of Equatorial Guinea, standing next to Mr. Mugabe. He came into power in 1979. You guys, in your business, you need to go to Angola to see the scale of construction that's going on. It's incredible. Luanda is a building site. It's mad when you get to Luanda. And people say, wow, that's fantastic what's happening in Angola. The president is doing a good job and da-da-da-da-da-da. How good a job is he doing if he's been in power since 1979 and his daughter is the richest person in the country? She's also the richest person in Portugal. It tells you something. Anyway, so there you go. He's been in power since 1979. He's also changed the constitution to give him the ability to go on for another 8 years. So he's just going to stay. So you might say, Luanda is fantastic. They're building like nobody's business. But really, is that where we're going? Well, that's Italy. Silvio Berlusconi is coming back. You think about a country like Libya. Libya had Muammar Gaddafi, and Muammar Gaddafi came into power in 1969. So he gets into power, stays in power, and you go off to primary school, you go to university, you come back, you go into business, you get a call, you go into the family business, and after a while, the family tells you, no, we don't like you very much. You go and start off your own shop, and you're fantastic, you're doing well. After 42 years, you buy yourself a nice convertible, you're having a midlife crisis, and one guy is still president of your country. That's Muammar Gaddafi, in power for 42 years, and they had to kick him out. So you look at all these countries, and many comparisons are made about South Africa, and we are at this point, and it's just going to get worse and so forth. I just want to say our story is turning out to be quite different from the stories of these other countries. You think about Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, a lot of people said, this guy's going to stay on and on and on. He said, no, thank you. I want to spend time with my kids. I'm going to do just 5 years. By 1999, when Nelson Mandela had done 5 years, many people were begging him to stay. He's so amazing. He's the father of the nation. Please stay on. He said, no, I don't want to stay on. I'm leaving. And he left after 5 years. Thabo Mbeki came in after him. Thabo Mbeki was doing very well. You saw those slides showing economic growth. Under Thabo Mbeki in 2006, we were touching 6% growth in this country. It was amazing. Unemployment had gone back from 25% to 21%. We were pumping. It was whoa. Of course, the globe was also doing fantastically well, but it was a fantastic. It was a country that looked like all the indices were looking up. And so, what does the ANC say? In 2008, it says, no, Chief, it's time for you to leave. And Thabo Mbeki didn't say, no, this is a coup d'etat. Many people said, no, it's a coup, it's this. Thabo Mbeki said, I've been a member of the ANC for 52 years. This is a party system. The party system says, none of you here voted for the ANC. None of you voted for Jacob Zuma, but you voted for the ANC. So the ANC can choose to get rid of President Zuma and can choose to put someone else in. Same thing with the Labour Party in the UK, where they got rid of Tony Blair and put in Gordon Brown. So they kicked out Thabo Mbeki and put in this fine young man. Many of you won't remember him. He was president for 9 months. His name is Kgalema Motlanthe. And he sat there. After 9 months, after 9 months, you start getting used to the office. You think, I know where the whiskey is. You could stay on a little bit longer. Did he stay on a little bit longer? No. In 2009, South Africans voted for President Zuma, and he said, thank you, President Zuma, there it is. And President Zuma is in charge, he's in his second term, and he's the 4th president we've had in just 21 years. And I think if President Zuma starts saying, I want to stay on a little bit longer, there will be people inside the ANC who will kick him out. So I think that's a good thing. I think the story is not the same as many of the other stories that are told about the rest of this continent. And the key thing is that there's an institution that continues to work and which I hope continues to work. And it's the system we've set up of voting, all of us going out and believing that actually the IEC is giving us a free and fair election. And it will be tested next year because there will be real competition. And if it survives that and survives in 2019 without being without trying to crook things, then I think we'll be doing very, very well. So I think South Africa still has I still think South Africa is a buy, simply because institutions like this one work, because a woman like this can be such an example for all of us. This is the public protector who has faced incredible, huge pressure, but has come out as one of the best people and best institutions we have in South Africa. So despite all my worry about South Africa, I think there are institutions that still work. We need to help them to work, and that's why we all need to raise our voices when things don't go well. And if we do that, I think that people like her will flourish in South Africa and will do well. Thank you very much.